My name is Matt Reber. I'm the manager, buyer, guy who humps the books here, not in the way you would expect. This is the first kind of official event inside the Wexner Center store, and I thought it would be great to start it off with my friend, William E. Jones. And how he's become my friend is he's, as you all know, he's an artist that is frequently, like April, in our film video studio, and on breaks comes down to the store, and he and I have developed a really nice friendship through the hours and hours and hours of breaks that he has while Paul is running stuff onto videotape for him. Anyway, I'm really happy and psyched and pleased to have William here talk about his new book, True Homosexual Experiences. William, come on up. Thanks.
An almost vacant front row. I assure you there's nothing to be afraid of. Okay, so this is a real reading. I'm going to be reading from a prepared text. This is from the introduction of True Homosexual Experiences, and it's called An Improbably Literate Hustler. Full of anticipation and unsure what he's looking for, a young man enters an adult bookstore. Stepping through a creaky door bearing a warning sign, "No minors," he heads for the magazine rack. Among the glossy, full-color porno magazines giving off a chemical smell, he sees a small pamphlet-sized publication called Straight to Hell. The title recalls condemnations such as "God hates fags," but at the same time suggests defiance. Anyone on the straight and narrow path can go to hell. The cover features an image of a naked man who looks nothing like a model and maybe an ex-convict. Not fabulous or campy, the booklet seems old-fashioned and homemade, the opposite of what the young man has been led to expect from gay culture. Inside the issue, there is a rhyming slogan in the masthead: "Love and hate for the American straight." Straight to Hell's visual style is immediately recognizable yet anonymous, just like its contents. Lurid tabloid-style headlines introduce texts contributed by the readers. They describe sex acts between men in many different settings in various parts of the United States and the rest of the world. This comes as news to the young man. Homosexuality is not just confined to a few neighborhoods in big cities, and is more or less, for lack of a better word, ordinary. The young man shoplifts a copy of Straight to Hell. I don't suggest you do that here. And at home, he masturbates to the words and pictures. Though he doesn't realize it at first, this small booklet has changed his life. On one page, there is an address, a post office box in New York City, where he can send orders for more issues and submit his own sex stories. Accompanying the address is a name: Boyd McDonald. McDonald, founding editor of Straight to Hell, was the main creative force behind one of the most distinctive underground publications, in fact, the first queer zine. Self-published and crude, Straight to Hell's sense of urgency was as strong as its contempt for authority. Fanzines and underground comics of the 60s and early 70s had combined these elements before, but none of them were devoted to homosexual material. From the 1950s onward, early gay publications, for example, One, The Homosexual Viewpoint, and Physique Pictorial, had used the same format, the size of an 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper folded in half. But none of these prepared readers for Straight to Hell. The main difference from its predecessors was its attitude. The man who assembled this material just didn't give a damn about any recognized standard of taste. Issues of Straight to Hell were illustrated with beefcake photographs and candid shots of men. Most were by Bob Miser of Athletic Model Guild or David Hurls of Old Reliable. But Straight to Hell also published many amateur photos sent in by subscribers. The unnamed men who contributed their stories came from all walks of life, barely literate to highly educated. Some were young, while others were old enough to remember the early days of the 20th century. They all had one thing in common: a need to write accounts of their sexual exploits and share them with their fellow men. Boyd McDonald attached great importance to his undertaking. He once wrote, "I consider this history, not pornography. It's very serious work. The true history of homosexual desire and experience. Any gay publications that do not deal with the elemental discussion of gay sexual desire are not serious, they are frivolous." He collected sex stories from a multitude of men and kept his comments on them to a minimum. Boyd McDonald reserved most of his editorial commentary for news items about the stupidity, hate, and warmongering of American politicians. Recognize that? And he illustrated them with unflattering photographs. Boyd knew how to spot a con artist, especially one who had wrapped himself in the flag. Boyd made his political opinions explicit, but he wrote about his personal life reluctantly. A brief account, varying only slightly over the years, became the basis of a compelling biographical myth. One author's bio from the early 1980s is typical. Boyd McDonald was born in South Dakota in 1925. "I was a pioneer high school dropout," he writes, "leaving school to play badly in a bad traveling dance band. I was drafted into the Army, graduated from Harvard, and came to New York, where my principal activity was taking advantage of the city's public sexual recreation facilities. As a sideline, I worked as a hack writer for Time Magazine, Forbes, IBM, and even more sordid companies. I started the magazine STH, Straight to Hell, the Manhattan Review of Unnatural Acts, later renamed the New York Review of Cocksucking." He describes the pillars of the establishment as sordid and sends up the New York Review of Books by replacing books with cocksucking, a clear statement of priorities. The text is found at the back of the second anthology of True Homosexual Experiences, drawn from the pages of Straight to Hell. Eventually, 13 STH collections came out from various publishers. They all had concise, direct titles: Meat, Flesh, Sex, Cum, Smut, Juice, Wads, Cream, Filth, Skin, Raunch, Lewd, and Scum. A number of proposed titles: Bear, Heat, Hoses, Sex Hounds, Sperm, Stuff, Tools, and Used, remained unrealized at the time of Boyd's death in 1993. These books contain descriptions of how men look, act, walk, talk, dress, undress, taste, and smell. At first glance, Boyd's publications might appear to be indistinguishable from the many subsequent ones that copied Straight to Hell to less effect and acclaim. A careful reading of Straight to Hell reveals that its editor was possessed of a unique sensibility. His subversive wit graced every project on which he worked. Boyd had a reputation for being a curmudgeon, and beneath his polite demeanor was a fiercely individualistic anarchist. I interrupt this reading of my introduction to share with you a sample of the sort of text that Boyd published in his books. The story is called "Sucks Sailor's Scum from Youth's Butthole," and it is from Cum, True Homosexual Experiences, published in 1982. I had to take a business trip to a southern state in which pornography is strictly illegal. Since when I'm home, I have the habit of cruising my favorite porno shop every Saturday morning and get regular action, I was expecting a boring, chaste week down south. However, just before entering that state, I noted a genuine adult bookstore and movie. Monday, I had appointments with 3 prospective customers and got to the porno shop at about 3 p.m. The manager appeared to be a little worried. He said 6 sailors were in the movie room, having stopped by on their way to the Gulf. He said they had been cornholing a boy in the booth for over an hour. I said, "What's wrong with that? It sounds good to me." I asked if it was rape, and he said no, the kid begs for it. He said he knew the kid and that the kid's father was a judge in the next state. He said, "This is the South, you know, and 3 of those sailors are black." I told him not to worry and went into the movie room. 3 sailors, 1 white and 2 black, stood outside the movie booth. The door to the booth was closed, and I could hear fuck sounds. The big black sailor next to me had a huge bulge at his groin, and I reached over and felt it. He opened his pants and offered me his big, thick cock with a great plum-like head. Shamelessly, I went down on it right there in the movie room. When the booth door opened and the two sailors came out, one of the sailors said, "How is he?" and received the answer, "All sloppy with cum." Then the black sailor pulled out of my mouth and said, "How about you going in there and cleaning him up?" He pushed me in the booth ahead of him. In the booth was a beautiful sight. The boy, who was probably about 19 years old, was completely naked except for a pair of white crew socks, his legs up in the air against the sailor's shoulders. The sailor who had pushed me into the booth said, "Pull out, Tyrone. This dude is going to clean the cum out of that kid's ass so he won't be such a sloppy fuck next time." He pushed me in between the kid's ass cheeks. The kid's ass smelled like cock and mainly that chemical ammoniac smell of cum. I licked around his hole and it was loosened so much by getting laid that I could get my tongue well up inside. It was delicious to a cum hound like me. I got my tongue in there and lapped and slurped and had a ball. And now back to my introduction. We can all take a breath now. Okay. Now I gotta get serious again. In a recent biography, A Bit of Pleasure Reading, I was struck by the phrase improbably literate hustler, the kind of expression that brings to mind Victorian pieties about a whore with a heart of gold. The writer's assumption, presumably shared by many of his readers, is that for a biography to impart the greatest moral edification, the subject should be respectable, educated, and not a whore, or filthy, not educated, and a whore. The former kind of subject serves for inspirational stories. Someone just like me has succeeded. The latter for cautionary tales. Someone I wouldn't want to be has failed. The subject who confounds these categories poses difficulties, either when educated and a whore, i.e. unable to act in his or her best interests, a mentally ill person, or not educated and not a whore, i.e. childlike, unyielding, and unscrutable, a saint. The homosexual, considered mentally ill until fairly recently in the United States, can disturb these comforting habits of mind. The suspicion that educated men were enjoying the company of hustlers when they weren't toiling at their respectable jobs did not occur to the benighted American majority until the latter half of the 1960s, if then. With the arrival of AIDS in the US, an alarming number of homosexuals became physically ill, and the signs were unavoidable. Uninhibited fraternizing between men of different ethnic groups and social classes had been taking place, often in public, even in broad daylight, for many years. Then AIDS killed all the really interesting people, and a group of jealous perverts who appointed themselves defenders of the American way of life unleashed a backlash. Those who came into the world after the worst years of the AIDS crisis may imagine that the moral panic is a thing of the past, like the witch trial. But anyone who lived through that time knows that moral entrepreneurs, when they aren't occupied with stealing money and spending it on hustlers and drugs, are always looking for new excuses to spring into action. The American Puritanism nurturing moral panics also dictates that those with a sexual role in society, prostitutes, pornographers, promiscuous amateurs, cannot be taken seriously as artists. Discounting their work is an example of stereotypical thinking, the mob mentality enforcing conformity. Gay artists who really risked something, usually called erotic artists when not being prosecuted for obscenity, pandering, or endangering children, have only recently gained some credibility in American culture. For example, books published and art exhibited. Considering the joyous recklessness of their lives, the erratic quality of medical care for any but the privileged in this country, and that their generation was already decimated by AIDS, they have come to seem like combat veterans, but without medals, because instead of foreign enemies, they have been fighting the prejudice, pettiness, and hypocrisy of American society. They have sacrificed everything so the rest of us can see photographs of naked thugs, experience vicariously the kind of sex sensible people hesitate to seek out, and read stories of their colorful lives in explicit detail. Some of them contributed to Straight to Hell. A few are still alive today. They deserve our respect and gratitude. almost infantile in its defiance and not acknowledging the boundaries between public and private, Straight to Hell is easy to dismiss as the work of an obsessive crank. Yet within its pages, enduring truths can be found. Anyone can see this stuff is trash, but somehow it has never gone away. That is because the social ills Straight to Hell diagnoses have never gone away either. As long as brain and genitals must coexist in the same body, in other words, as long as we are human, we must reckon with Boyd McDonald and his inconvenient messages. Thank you. I can now take your questions if you have any questions to ask. Don't be shy.
Can you tell us about how the special edition came to be?
A wonderful question. All right. The forces of reaction are still very much with us today. The real, quote unquote, real edition of True Homosexual Experiences is a hardback book. And the publisher, seeking to economize, had these books printed in China. And we encountered absolutely no trouble with the printer in China, much to our relief. But we hadn't counted on what would happen when it tried to be shipped to the United States. The shippers in China all refused to make the shipment. Somebody opened up a box and undid the shrink wrap and looked at what was in the book and said, there's no way we're shipping this. So the cargo had to be transferred to Hong Kong and shipped from there because it's a free port and they don't do that kind of thing. In China, normally they have a customs inspection before you leave the country. I'm happy to say that the book has cleared customs at the Port of Long Beach and is on its way to the distributor. But unfortunately, this has not happened quickly enough to get hardback copies to the Wexner for this event. We knew this, we realized this in advance. So we cooked up a special edition exclusively for the Wexner. It is unfortunately paperback, but it is actually cheaper than the real edition. It's only $15. That's my sales pitch. And I decided to put extra material in it. It is called the All-Star Scum Suckers edition of True Homosexual Experiences. And while we were designing the book, the publisher expressed concerns about certain things that I wanted to put in the book. And I've put a few of them back into the book in this special edition. And they're mostly at the beginning and at the end of the book. At the end of the book is a suite of 6 pictures that were taken at the Cornell University Library. Cornell has a collection of Boyd McDonald papers, that's what they call it. It's really mostly business correspondence, it isn't anything personal. But included are some lovely paste-ups for SCUM, which was the last Straight to Hell anthology. So it's these pictures from Old Reliable of guys with hard-ons giving you the finger, and such other inspirational images with crop marks and percentages to the people who would do the printing and the paste up. So actually, it's a nice thing. We've got some extra pictures in the edition we're selling, and it's only at the Wexner. I feel terrible that we had to, we couldn't get the hardback in time for this event. But on the other hand, it is nice that there's exclusive product at the Wexner store. So, in China or in the US?
The special.
The special edition was actually done print on demand, and it was done very quickly. And
I love thinking about the university press.
Oh, well,
Trying to get out, but maybe not.
that stage of decrepitude has yet to descend upon me. I have not yet dealt with the university press before. Oh, actually, that's not true. My biography of Fred Halstead, which I did in 2011, Halstead plays himself. It was published by Semiotext, but they're distributed by MIT Press. And very much to my, it made me very, very happy that MIT Press said, we love the manuscript and we will defend it if necessary. And they didn't ask me to change a word or a picture. So, I shouldn't slag the university press as an institution. They were, though, only the distributor. This actually is an independent press called We Heard You Like Books, and it's in Los Angeles, and this is the second book published by We Heard You Like Books. The first is one you may have heard of called I Hate the Internet, because a reading from that was done just a couple of months ago here. Not here, but I think it was in the cartoon library. Any other questions? Oh, please. I love answering questions. You must have something on your mind. Yes?
How did you first hear of Boyd?
Okay. I talk about the young man and the porno store. That wasn't me. That's actually an adaptation of a story of somebody I know who discovered Straight to Hell in Athens, Georgia. But I first heard of Boyd through queer zines. I was an active participant in that scene in the early 90s, and I knew a lot of the people involved in making zines. And they all revered Boyd. And that's when I first saw when I first saw issues of Straight to Hell. Boyd edited it from 1973 to 1981. And then from 81 to 88 or 89, it was edited by Victor Weaver, who unfortunately I could not track down from my biography. He does not want to be found. And then from 1989 onward, it's been edited by Billy Miller, who is still bringing out issues. Issue 68, I think, only came out a couple of months ago. So it's kind of a great thing that this institution that was founded it's like producing mimeographed sheets is hardly an institutional project. But this publication that started in 73 is now still going. Unfortunately, no one is doing the compilations. They're available as used books. Meet, the first one, sold 50,000 copies, so it's not difficult to get copies used on whatever site you go to or to find these things. Some of them actually have become somewhat rare, and I would love to republish them, but I concentrated my efforts on Cruising the Movies, which I wrote the introduction for, and that came out in the fall of last year. And it's also on sale in the store, by the way. A catchy cover, eye-catching cover. But the Cruising the Movies is Boyd's film writing, which I don't discuss in what I've just read to you, but it's actually hilarious and wonderful, and very, completely disrespectful of authority, of course. Any more questions? Oh, good. I don't even have to have shills.
I guess what I was going to ask you about biography as a genre and how you feel that your work transforms the genre, and do you feel like you've followed Boyd McDonald in transforming it? Do you feel like biography was something that he himself was in? You said that he's very reticent about his own biography.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you got the direction for your type, the way that you write this biography from Boyd McDonald, or is it coming from your own work or other sources?
Yeah, it definitely comes from other sources. I went to school during the heyday of deconstruction in the United States, and biography was the bad object. It was something only idiots did. And I got very angry at that. I thought that was terrible. It was all about the text, divorced of any considerations of who wrote it. And I was still interested in biographical criticism. Maybe I'm just a slow learner or something. But biography has been a form that's fascinated me. I love reading them. I love writing them. That's something that is important to me and has been for many years. The decisive moment came when I read a book called The Quest for Corvo. And it's a wonderful, wonderful book. It's been republished not long ago by the New York Review of Books Press. and I highly recommend it. It's by a guy named A.J.A. Simmons, or Simons. I've never actually learned how to pronounce his name. But he wrote a book about a man named William Frederick Rolfe, who was a ruined priest and a homosexual who was he grew up in Edwardian England and then fled to Venice where he could pick up boys, where he died indigent. And he was a thoroughly obnoxious character. Everyone who ever offered him help or hospitality, he just shat on. He was a really obnoxious fellow, probably mentally ill. And he wrote these texts that are almost unreadable. His most famous novel is called Hadrian the Seventh. And if you're a fan, I apologize, but it's something that I find very difficult to get through. A very ornate literary style. A.J.A. Simmons became obsessed with this writer and discovered he had died about 20 years before he started his researches. And he painstakingly tracked down manuscripts and rare books and found people who knew him and interviewed them. And the result is something he called an experiment in biography, and it was published in 1936. And it's a really beautiful, readable, but at the same time very radical book, because it not only discusses Baron Corvo, it discusses his own search for Corvo. And so it's a kind of detective story. And it's completely compelling. And this was really one of the decisive works of literature I ever read. And it gave me a model that I could think about when I did other projects. And if any of you've seen my films, the second feature I did called Finished, about the suicide of a gay porn star, Alan Lambert, I was really at a loss as to how to make that into something, because I didn't want to do a conventional biography. And The Quest for Corvo gave me that answer of how to handle that question. And I've been flogging it to death ever since. Simmons wrote very few books, and I've written a lot more than he. But I think it's appropriate. For one thing, I gravitate to queer subject matter, to people who are dismissed by mainstream culture or demonized by mainstream culture. I could say something really bitchy about one of my fellow authors. Someone whose work I'm reacting against is Janet Malcolm. For all I know, she could be a nice lady, but those books, they take famous subjects and knock them down a peg for regular readers. And I do the opposite. I'm interested in taking people you would never take seriously in a million years, supposedly, and dignifying what they did, elevating it, so that you can see that there's actually something truly important and radical about it. So I'm doing the kind of opposite motion, lifting something up, and I think that's a worthy project, not because of personal love or lust. It's part of our society that there are people who are demonized simply because of the accident of their birth, or because they're difficult to get along with, or because they want to write about subject matter most people don't consider fit for print. And I'm interested in reintroducing that into our culture and alerting people to that importance. I think it's a project also that it has a certain dynamism to it. It's shaking things up a bit, which I'm all for that. Thank you for that question. My friend Richard, yes.
This is reminding me of a film that I saw either on Netflix or acorn.tv, and I don't remember which, but maybe you've seen it, where they're interviewing an old gay couple in Switzerland, I think, and talking about a period when a similar small group was publishing things.
Mm-hmm.
And those scenes are played by actors, but then you see those people. Do you know that film?
I don't. I mean, I can only have a kind of...
It's very interesting.
I can only make a digression. There was a very early gay rights publication in Switzerland called Der Kreis, The Circle. And it's a fascinating case because Der Kreis was completely devoted to assimilationist politics. They wanted gay guys to form couples that were like heterosexual couples, and they thought this was the vehicle for acceptance in a wider society. And they were writing this stuff in the 1930s.
Yeah.
So it's a...
This film is amazing because they're interviewing two people who were involved with it, and they play quite authentically that period.
Yeah, and I actually deal with Der Kreis in the book because it has a remote connection to Boyd. There's another figure named Samuel Stewart who had a rather famous book about him called The Secret Historian. And Samuel Stewart actually contributed to Der Kreis, but he was totally frustrated because, you know, the stories could be nothing but hand-holding and romance, and there was just no sex in them whatsoever. And this relates to something Boyd McDonald complained about consistently and wrote about in his polemics. He drew a very important distinction between homosexuality, which was sexual activity as it exists in the world, and gayness. And for him to be gay was to be a kind of eunuch, to be the political, public gay. Like, you know, you come out to your parents, or you come out to the city council, or, you know, you raise money for whatever gay political cause, but you don't talk about your sex life. That, you know, you become a kind of respectable eunuch. And he hated those people. He had nothing but contempt for that form of hypocrisy. Because as he saw it, it was trading one form of hypocrisy for another. And he actually preferred the former kind of hypocrisy. And so he relentlessly talked about explicit sex and, you know, really enjoyed his position as a pariah. And I think these questions have not lost their relevance. I'm appalled that there are so few gay bars left in Columbus, because I'm a fan of the old Bow Wow. If any of you remember it, I wish to memorialize that in this talk right now. Bring back the old Bow Wow. And then, you know, Club 20 is gone from around the corner from where I stay when I'm here. And, oh, it's back? Where is it, in the same place? Well, hallelujah. But, you know, a neighborhood gay bar, is that too much to ask for a city of 700,000 people? So yeah, so I won't go on about that. But, you know, bring back the old Bow Wow, damn it. All right. Any other questions? Are you getting antsy, or you want me to answer another question or two? Yeah.
Are you going to write your autobiography? Ooh, yeah, good question.
It's unlikely to happen anytime soon. Maybe when I'm old and getting sentimental, I'll do that. But one thing I should mention is that there's an autobiographical element to every single thing I write. I can't adhere to the discipline of writing only in third person. I have to discuss my position on every topic that I write about at any length. And I actually think it's more dynamic to have a kind of debate or a contrast between first-person narration and third-person narration. Because there are some things you can only say in the first person, and there are other things that are perhaps better left to third person. You need a kind of omniscient narrator to write a certain kind of history, but, you know, I think it's nice to have at least the mention of where you're coming from in the story. So that's, you know, you get autobiographical details about me, but you don't get the full I think it's kind of boring, frankly. My own life, my own autobiography. But who knows what will happen, you know, then I couldn't rule it out completely. And, you know, a few people have mentioned, oh, you know, like, you're more interesting than the subject of Finished. Why did you bother to make a film about another person? And I don't believe that to be the case. And I think, you know, Boyd was a fascinating character. I do mention things in the first person in the book, but he's, you know, I think if I didn't write this book, no one would have. I hate to say it. Or maybe they would have written it 10 years from now, and it would have been someone who would have encountered nothing but dead people. The urgency, another aspect of it that's very important to me is a certain sense of urgency. That a couple of people who knew Boyd well died right before I started the book. a bookstore owner called John Mitzel, who owned Calamus Books in Boston, and Gore Vidal. I'm sure you've heard of him, at least some of you. Gore Vidal and Boyd would talk on the phone all the time, talking about their tricks. And Gore Vidal died before I had the chance to interview him. He was living in town. He was living in Los Angeles, where I live, and I didn't get it together quickly enough to interview him. And that's often a kind of motivating factor in a book, that somebody I really should have spoken to, they died before I could get access. So I had to go around and speak to as many people as I could who were still alive. But then the Gore Vidal story it's a little kink in my narrative, which is in the book, which you might, and then it also involves John Waters, who very kindly wrote a blurb, like very happy about that. I'll tell a slightly egomaniacal story. We tried to get John Waters to write a blurb for the book because he thought, he's a fan of Boyd McDonald. And his assistant said he never writes blurbs, not even for his friends. And well, just give us the address, see if he'll read it. And so we sent him the manuscript, and within a week, he'd read it and written a blurb for free. So he was very enthusiastic about the project, and I'm very happy about that.
So a movie might be coming.
Well, that remains to be seen. It would be a happy day when John Waters made a new movie, but there aren't a lot of them in the pipeline, unfortunately. And I'm following his model. I'm often unable to make films, even though I was trained as a filmmaker. And when I can't make a film, I write a book. And John Waters is doing the same thing. When he can't direct films, he's writing books. And if you haven't read them, they're splendid. Role Models is just hilarious and wonderful and heartbreaking. And I quote from it liberally in the Boyd McDonald book. So that's a plug for another author. Any other questions? Oh yeah, Tyler.
Kind of opening for me to ask an autobiographical question, I guess, about the shift in your own life between filmmaker, artist, author, and
it's pure opportunism. I mean, opportunism, maybe it's a strong word for it, but I go where I have opportunities. That's one thing. I've written for publication, and I've been very, very fortunate. People want me to publish, or they want me to write for them, and I have to turn people down to publish things. So it's a great position to be in, and it's also a symptom of the fluctuations of the art market. There are times when you sell a lot of work, and there are times when you sell nothing. And in the periods that are really fallow for me, when I don't have a grant or something like that, I write a book, because all it involves. One decisive thing is I went to the Headlands. I did a residency at the Headlands Center for the Arts in Marin County, and it really imposed an arts residency discipline on me. And I produced a book called Imitation of Christ, which was an exhibition catalog for an exhibition I curated at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. And that imposed a kind of discipline. And I thought to myself, well, I don't have to go to Marin County. I can sit in my apartment in Los Angeles and have an artist residency just, in my bedroom. And that's what I've been doing every summer. And so it took 2 summers to finish the Boyd book. I'm getting quicker. I'm getting better at it, which is also a nice, gratifying thing. And that's something I actually tell the students I see. Every so often I'm in a position to teach writing, and I tell them it actually doesn't matter what I tell you. If you write every week, or even better, if you write every day, you will get better at it. No matter who is advising you, it's really a matter of practice. And I think this is, a great lesson for people to keep in mind. It doesn't actually matter if you're getting published imminently. It doesn't matter who your audience is, even if it's only you. If you write every day, you will get better at it. So that's part of it as well. It's like, I'm involved in this project of becoming a better writer. And that's actually kind of exciting in and of itself. So I don't know, that's the best answer I can come to. But I'm, you know, I never wanted to be the guy who does that. Like, I'm the guy who makes a painting who looks like that, or I'm the guy who makes a film who looks like that. And that's very, very good for the market. You know, people love it. The collectors say characteristic work, which is it's an expression that makes me want to projectile vomit. And I'm against that in principle. So I try to do as many different things as I can. And the lovely thing about that is sometimes I strike upon something that I'm actually good at. And it's also, I've been kind of in denial. I think it's been clear since I was a child that I could write. And I've been avoiding that. When I was an undergraduate, it was expected that we would write in this kind of discourse of theory, kind of pseudo-philosophical discourse, which I thought was just poisonous. I couldn't write that way. I couldn't contort my intellect in that way. Some people can, and good for them, but it wasn't possible for me. So it really got me away from writing for decades. And then out of sheer opportunism, I became an artist who writes. And the wonderful thing about being an artist is that nobody is standing over your shoulder saying, you can't do that. That's not the proper form for that essay. This is not MLA standards, whatever you want to, however you want to put it. You know what I'm talking about. You're at a university. And if you're an artist who writes, you're like a madman. And you can do whatever you want, and people don't bat an eye. So that was another thing. It took me a while to get to a position where I had this kind of freedom. And freedom is really, that's the most precious thing you can have if you're an artist, I believe. And in that respect, I agree with Seth Price. He has categories of artists, and he talks about their motivations. And for him, the highest motivation for making art is to have freedom. And that's one of the aspects of being an artist who writes. You have freedom to write what you want. Is that where we should stop? All right. Well, thank you for coming, and I will be available to sign books. Should I sign up here?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yes.
he'll sign books up here. We'll get the chairs out of here. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks, William.
The inaugural event of this great reading series.
When's your next book coming out?
Oh, I should talk about the because I got a normal grant to do that. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, thanks.